What if I told you 3 children were left alone in a locked apartment for 5 years? And no one noticed? February 18th, 2024, Houston, Texas. Michelle Rodriguez wasn't the paranoid type. A single mother of a toddler, she had lived through enough real struggle to know the difference between danger and anxiety. But that night, something felt off. Her 2-year-old daughter, Ava, had just woken up screaming from a nightmare. Michelle had rocked her back to sleep, humming softly under her breath, when she heard it. A sound. Faint. Dragging. Almost animal-like. She froze. It wasn't coming from her apartment. It was coming from next door, apartment 4B. At first, she told herself it was nothing. Probably an old pipe, or the neighbors moving furniture. But as she sat back down on the couch, holding her now dozing daughter, the noise returned. A slow, scraping shuffle across the floor. Then silence. Her eyes moved toward the shared wall. She knew nobody had lived in 4B for a while, at least not as far as she could tell. Since moving into 4C 3 weeks ago, she'd never seen anyone come or go. No TV, no music, no conversations, just stillness. Except at night. Michelle was used to chaos. She'd grown up in foster care, survived domestic abuse, and worked 2 jobs just to keep Ava fed. But what she was hearing, what she was feeling, was something different. Something wasn't right in that apartment. The next morning, she asked the building's elderly tenant in 4A, Mrs. Johnson, about it. "Oh, that's the Brooks place," the old woman replied, shuffling her mail. "Valencia Brooks and her kids." Michelle blinked. "Kids? You mean there are children living there?" Mrs. Johnson shrugged. "Used to be. I haven't seen him shoot months, maybe longer. That woman was always coming and going. Never saw her with those babies much. You know how some people are. Never should have been a mother." Michelle's stomach twisted. She didn't like gossip, but she knew what it meant when neighbors ignored warning signs. She'd seen it as a child, when bruises were explained away, when screaming through walls went unreported. And now, here she was again, older, stronger, a mother herself, and hearing sounds she couldn't unhear. That night, it got worse. At 2:06 a.m., Michelle was lying awake in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling fan, when she heard it again. Rustling, scraping, whimpering. But this time there was a new sound. Crying. Not loud, not dramatic, just soft, choked, lonely. It was the unmistakable cry of a child who had been crying alone for far too long. Michelle sat up, heart racing. For a moment, she questioned herself. Could it be a TV? No. Could it be a neighbor upstairs? No. It was next door, right through the wall. She crept into the living room, pressed her ear against the drywall, and heard it clearly now, a soft sob, followed by a muffled voice. "Mama, Mama, where are you?" Michelle backed away, shaking. She looked down at Ava's sleeping on the couch, cheeks flushed and peaceful, and something inside her snapped. Whatever was happening in apartment 4B, it wasn't just strange. It wasn't just wrong. It was criminal. At 2:14 a.m., Michelle called 911. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report a welfare check, she whispered, glancing toward the wall like it might hear her. There are kids next door. I don't know how many, but I don't think any adults live there. What's the address? Michelle gave it, hands trembling. How long have you heard these sounds? 3 weeks. Since I moved in. But my neighbor says she hasn't seen anyone from that unit in months. It's like there are ghosts in there. We'll send someone to check it out. Michelle thanked the dispatcher and hung up. The silence that followed wasn't comforting. It felt louder than the noise. She sat still on the couch, Ava breathing softly against her chest, and stared at the wall between 4B and 4C. A dozen memories flashed through her mind. She was 10 again, hiding in a closet while her mother's boyfriend shouted in the next room. She was 12, trying to tell a teacher that her bruises weren't from falling down the stairs. And she was 15, sitting in a CPS office after someone finally believed her. That someone had been a neighbor. A woman who lived 2 doors down and dared to knock. A woman Michelle never got to thank. And now here she was in that same position. What if she was wrong? What if it was just some old plumbing and she ended up looking crazy, like another single mom with too much imagination? But what if she was right? Michelle looked down at Ava, at the soft rise and fall of her tiny chest. The thought of any child crying out into the darkness with no one to answer. It tore something inside her clean in two. She whispered a prayer, not even knowing who it was for. For the kids. For herself. For whatever was on the other side of that wall. She got up, triple-checked the locks, and sat on the floor beside the couch, listening. Nothing now, but the silence felt different, like it was watching her. She stayed up the rest of the night, eyes open, ears straining for any hint of movement. By the time dawn slipped through the edges of her curtains, she had made a vow. If the police didn't show up, she would knock on the door herself. Because this time, she wouldn't be the one who looked away. Michelle hung up and stared into the dark. She didn't know what police would find in that apartment, but she knew one thing for sure. Whatever was behind that door, those kids had been forgotten. And if someone didn't step in soon, it might be too late. February 20th, 2024, 8:32 a.m. Houston police officers Maria Santos and James Wright stood outside apartment 4B with a sinking feeling in their gut. They'd seen a lot in their combined 30 years on the force. Drug busts, domestic violence, even dead bodies. But there was something different about this one. Something that clung to the air like humidity before a storm. Officer Santos knocked. Houston Police Department. We're doing a welfare check. Silence. She knocked again, louder. Hello? Anyone home? Still nothing. Then a shuffle. Soft. Hesitant. And a voice. Go away. Santos and Wright froze. It was a child's voice. Small. Raspy. Like it hadn't spoken in a long time. Sweetheart. We're police officers, Santos called gently. We're here to help. Are you okay? A long pause. Then, Mama said not to open the door for nobody. Wright knelt down near the door. Is your mama home? No. When did she leave, son? I don't remember. Santos leaned toward the peephole, trying to get a glimpse inside, but it was covered with something, a towel, maybe. She could smell something now. Rot. Urine. Mold. It hit the back of her throat like acid. What's your name? She asked softly. Jalen. How old are you, Jalen? 15. Santos looked at Wright. That voice sounded like it belonged to an 8-year-old, 10 at most. Malnourishment, she thought. Are there other kids in there with you? My sister. And my little brother. No other grown-ups? No. She stepped back. We need to get in. Wright nodded and radioed for backup, while Santos tried again. Jalen, can you open the door for us? Silence. Then, the sound of chains sliding. A deadbolt clicking. And finally, the door creaked open. What they saw inside would haunt them for the rest of their careers. Officer Santos had seen a lot in her 17 years on the force. But nothing had prepared her for the sight behind that door. She turned away instinctively, stepping back into the hallway and pressing a hand over her mouth. The stench hit her like a punch to the gut. Rot. Decay. Something worse. Her stomach turned violently. She braced one hand against the wall and gagged. Wright, meanwhile, stood frozen. He wasn't new to tragedy. Domestic calls, overdose scenes, even the aftermath of child abuse. But this was something else entirely. Not just neglect, not just poverty. It was like walking into a room where hope had died a long time ago. He backed away slowly into the stairwell, needing air. His hands trembled as he unclipped his radio. He could still hear the kids' voices. The way Jalen had said, Mama said not to open the door for nobody. The way that didn't sound like fear, but routine. Santos leaned against the wall outside, blinking back tears she hadn't realized were falling. She thought of her niece, the same age as Jada. She pictured her alone in the dark for even one night, and her knees almost gave out. When Wright came back up the stairs, their eyes met. Jesus, he muttered. We're too late. No, Santos said, voice low but firm. We're right on time. Neither spoke for a moment. Then Santos straightened her shoulders. They're still alive, she said. That means we do our job. All the way. Wright nodded, and together, they stepped back into the nightmare. This time with gloves on, backup on the way, and their hearts braced for what they were about to uncover. But deep down they knew this one would stay with them. Forever. Jalen Harris stood barefoot in the doorway, barely 5 feet tall, weighing no more than 70 pounds. His skin was ashy and covered in sores. His hair was thick, matted, stuck to his scalp like ropes of grease. His fingernails were so long they curled, yellowing at the tips like claws. He wasn't crying. He wasn't talking. He was just there, staring at them with eyes that had forgotten what hope looked like. Behind him, crouched in the shadows of a dark, windowless living room, were two more figures, a girl with identical features, but longer hair tangled past her waist, and a younger boy, gripping a filthy, eyeless stuffed animal to his chest like it was the last piece of sanity he had. The apartment smelled like death. Santos stepped inside and had to cover her nose with her sleeve. Trash was piled high in every corner. Rotting food containers. Maggots. The walls were streaked with what looked like feces. There were no working lights. The windows had been sealed with thick blankets and duct tape. The air was thick, damp, and choking. And there were no signs of adult life. No toothbrushes. No female clothing. No car keys. No shoes by the door. Just 3 children who looked like they had crawled out of the pages of a horror novel. I called in. Dispatch, this is Unit 12. We have 3 minors in apartment 4B. Severe neglect. Requesting immediate EMS and child protective services. Multiple units. This is urgent. Jalen still hadn't moved. Santos knelt down slowly. Honey, do you know where your mom went? He blinked. She went to handle some business. When was that? A long time ago. Santos looked around. There were tally marks scratched into the bedroom wall. Hundreds of them. She started counting. 1,100, 1,600, 1,825. 5 years. He'd been counting, day by day, waiting, hoping, being forgotten. The youngest boy, Cameron, suddenly wet himself. He didn't even flinch, just stood there in his own urine, blank-eyed. The girl, Jada, began rocking back and forth, eyes fixed on the ceiling, mumbling to herself in a voice so soft it was barely audible. None of them asked where their mom was. None of them asked who the police were. None of them cried. They had forgotten how to be children. Within 10 minutes, the hallway was full. Paramedics, child services detectives. Jalen tried to shield his siblings, hissing and clawing like a wild animal when a nurse reached toward him. These kids don't trust anybody, Wright whispered. Not anymore. They were gently carried out on stretchers, wrapped in blankets, blinking against sunlight like it burned their skin. Neighbors gathered. Phones recorded. Some cried. Some just stared. But Michelle Rodriguez, the woman who made the call, stood to the side, holding her daughter tight, sobbing into her hands. God help them, she whispered. God help them. That afternoon, Detective Sarah Martinez arrived at the scene. Hardened, methodical, and fiercely compassionate, she surveyed the apartment with an expression that shifted from disgust to fury. The question hung in the air like the stench in the room. Where the hell was their mother? And more importantly, what kind of person does this to their own children and just walks away? To understand how 3 children could be left to rot inside a Houston apartment for 5 years, you have to understand Monica Harris. On the surface, Monica was everything America loves to praise. Attractive, confident, ambitious. But behind the filters and carefully curated Instagram captions was a woman with a dark gift. The ability to erase responsibility like wiping makeup off a mirror. Born and raised in Dallas, Texas, Monica came from a respectable middle-class family. Her parents, Robert and Denise Harris, were teachers, devout churchgoers, and the kind of couple who believed structure and discipline could solve anything. Monica was their only child. She was spoiled with ballet lessons, piano recitals, and weekend road trips. But by the time she turned 15, something was off. She craved attention. Not praise, attention. Eyes on her always. When boys whistled at her on the street, she smiled. When grown men offered rides home, she got in. At 16, she was dating a 23-year-old named Marcus Walker, a community college dropout with a used Camaro and a half-sleeve tattoo. By 17, she was pregnant. Her parents were devastated. "We raised you better than this," her mother said, crying at the kitchen table. Monica shrugged. "At least he has a car." She gave birth to a baby girl, Essence, and for a brief moment, tried to be a mother. diapers, bottles, sleepless nights. But it didn't take long for Monica to crack under the pressure. "I'm too young for this," she told her mom. And just like that, she handed Essence over to her parents and never looked back. In 2005, Monica moved to Houston. Her dream? Modeling. Her reality? Living off men. She waitressed, dabbled in retail, promoted clubs on weekends. Every job ended the same way: boredom, lateness, termination. But there was always a man, someone to cover rent, buy clothes, post her selfies online. She became an expert in performance. "I'm just trying to get my life together. I'm not ready for anything serious. I've been through a lot, you know." It worked. Men came and went. But children? Children were a problem. They got in the way. They required patience, love, sacrifice, things Monica viewed as traps, not virtues. In 2009, she got pregnant again. Twins this time, with a man named Raymond Daniels, a construction worker who thought they were building a future. At first, he was thrilled. Twins. Baby, we're going to be a real family. By month 7, he was working long hours, staying out late, drinking. When Jalen and Jada were 6 months old, he vanished. A handwritten note on the kitchen table. "I can't do this. I'm sorry. I'll send money when I can." He never did. By 2012, Monica was 26, with no degree, no job, no partner, and 2 toddlers she didn't want. Then came Cameron, unplanned, unwanted, and born out of a desperate attempt to hold on to a new boyfriend who left the moment she said, "I'm late." Now she had 3 kids under 4 and a sinking feeling in her chest. "I'm trapped." But Monica wasn't the type to suffer in silence. She learned to work the system. Government housing in Overtown. WIC, food stamps, childcare vouchers. She told social workers she was homeschooling the twins because public school was too violent. They believed her. Meanwhile, she partied, slept all day, left the kids locked inside, sometimes for days, sometimes longer. Neighbors didn't ask questions. It wasn't that kind of neighborhood. The kids raised themselves. Jalen learned to make cereal. Jada bathed Cameron. When they cried, Monica yelled. When they were sick, she sighed and turned up the TV volume. In late 2018, Monica met Darius Taylor at a landscaping expo. Darius was everything her baby daddies weren't. 42 years old, owner of a successful landscaping business in Sugar Land. Clean-cut, educated, focused, and most importantly, "I don't do kids," he said over their first date. "I'm at a point in life where I want to focus on my partner, not raise someone else's." That sentence changed everything. For Monica, this wasn't a red flag. It was a green light. In January 2019, she began planning. She set up automatic rent payments from a shared account Darius thought was for a storage unit. Registered with a low-budget grocery delivery app, using her EBT card. Told school officials the children were being permanently homeschooled. To her kids, she spun it like an adventure. "Mama's gonna go handle some business. You're big now. Be good, and I'll be back real soon." They nodded. They believed her. They didn't know it was goodbye. On March 12th, 2019, Monica packed a small suitcase, wrote a note, and stood for one last time at their bedroom door. Jalen was curled up at the foot of the bed. Jada was holding Cameron's hand. "Mama," Cameron whispered in his sleep. Her phone buzzed. A text from Darius. "Can't wait to start our new life together. You ready?" She smiled, walked to the door, locked it behind her, and never came back. What Monica didn't know, or didn't care to know, was that Jalen would scratch one tally mark into the wall for each day she was gone. 1,825 days. Each one a promise. Each one a lie. Jalen Harris didn't cry the morning his mother left. He didn't throw a tantrum or cling to her legs like Cameron did when she used to leave for a night out. He just stood there, barefoot in the hallway, staring at the door as it clicked shut behind her. A small voice in his head said, "She'll be back," and he clung to that thought like a child holding a balloon in a hurricane. He found a note on the counter. "Gonna handle some business. Food coming every Tuesday. Rent paid. Utilities paid. Don't answer the door. Don't go outside. Back soon. Mama." At first, it felt like a game. An extended sleepover. No school. No rules. No yelling. The food delivery came that first Tuesday, just like she promised. For bags of canned ravioli, boxed cereal, peanut butter, crackers, juice. Nothing fresh. Nothing that needed cooking. Nothing that required a mother. Jalen divided the food as best he could. Jada helped. Cameron cried a lot, asking for their mama, but Jalen told him stories, made silly faces, anything to distract him. He'd always been the big brother, but now he was something more, the protector, the parent. Days blurred into weeks. He kept track by marking a line on the bedroom wall with a broken pencil. One for each sunrise. One for each day they survived. One for each day she didn't come back. They learned to live like shadows. No lights, no noise, no windows. Monica had covered them all with heavy blankets long ago to keep the nosy neighbors from spying. The kids kept them closed, even when the apartment started to smell. Even when the heat became unbearable in the summer and freezing in the winter. They rationed food. When the crackers got moldy, they ate around the green parts. When the milk soured, they drank juice. When the juice ran out, they drank tap water that tasted like metal and rust. Jalen taught Jada how to keep Cameron clean as best they could. They used rags from old t-shirts and cold water from a sink. The toilet stopped working by the 4th month, so they used a bucket. When the bucket filled, they dumped it in the tub. When the tub clogged, they just stopped caring. Roaches came, then ants, then rats, and still no one knocked. No one came. By the end of the first year, Cameron barely spoke. He sucked his thumb constantly, curled up in a corner with his filthy stuffed animal. Jada developed a rash on her legs that spread up to her stomach. Jalen's hair became thick ropes of grease and knots, impossible to brush. His bones ached from sleeping on the floor, his teeth yellowed, gums bleeding. But worse than the physical pain was the weight, the heavy, crushing emptiness that filled the apartment like fog. He stopped dreaming, stopped hoping, stopped believing she'd ever come back. By year 2, they had stopped speaking in full sentences. Jada mostly gestured. Cameron whimpered. Jalen only talked when necessary. It was like their voices had withered with the light. They learned not to look outside. When they heard footsteps in the hallway, they froze. When a knock came to the door, the rare one, from a food delivery or a curious maintenance guy, they went dead silent. They'd been trained well. Monica's voice still lived in their heads. Don't open the door for nobody. The only real routine they had was food. Every Tuesday, the groceries showed up outside the door like a cruel miracle. Jalen would wait until the hallway was silent, crack the door just enough to grab the bags, and then slam it shut like a hunted animal returning to its den. Sometimes the food was short. Sometimes things went missing. Sometimes the delivery never came. They learned to stretch, to wait, to go hungry for days. Jalen once gave all his food to his siblings and went 2 days without eating. When he finally fainted near the bathtub, Jada cried for hours, thinking he'd died. And still, no one came. By year 3, they had stopped counting the days. But Jalen didn't stop marking the wall. Each tally became a ritual, each one a thin strand of control in a world that had gone completely dark. Cameron started to wet himself regularly. He no longer recognized time, or meals, or names. He cried often, but always quietly. Jada, now around 13, had stopped smiling altogether. She stared at the same corner of the room for hours, lips moving, but no words coming out. Jalen tried. God, he tried. He cleaned, rationed food, comforted them, told stories about what life would be like when Mama comes back. But by year 4, even that lie lost its power. He hated her. He hated himself for missing her. He hated the door, the blankets, the roaches, the silence. He hated the way the outside world continued without them. People walking by, cars honking, music drifting from other apartments. He hated the fact that they had vanished and no one noticed. He'd scratch a line into the wall and whisper to himself, "One more day, one more day, one more day." He stopped writing the number. He already knew it by heart. 1,825. On the morning of day 1,825, something changed. The food delivery didn't come. Jalen felt the shift before he opened the door. The hallway didn't sound right. It felt watched. He peeked through the peephole and saw a woman standing by the stairs with a toddler in her arms. She wasn't a delivery person. She wasn't maintenance. She looked worried. Terrified, he backed away from the door. Jada grabbed his hand. Cameron whimpered. That night, the crying came from their side of the wall, and someone finally heard it. Detective Sarah Martinez stood in the middle of the apartment and tried to breathe through her mouth. The stench of mold, human waste, rotting food, and something she could only describe as despair clung to the walls like smoke. She had worked homicide, narcotics, even missing persons, but this was something else entirely. It was as if the apartment had been frozen in decay, untouched by light, love, or even time. She looked around. No family photos, no calendars, no mail. Just garbage, tally marks, broken toys, and children who barely responded to human voices. Who the hell does this? She thought. She turned to Officer Wright. What's the name again? Jalen Harris. 15. His sister's Jada. Also 15. And the little one's Cameron. 11. No parents. Wright shook his head. No adult on site. No sign of anyone living here but them. Martinez knelt by the wall of tallies, running her fingers lightly over the pencil scratches. There were 1,825. 5 years, she whispered. She turned to the children's caseworker, who had just arrived. Run everything. School records, CPS reports, anything under the name Harris. Start with Monica Harris. Back at the precinct, Martinez began digging. The first flag came fast. The apartment lease was still active and being paid on time, every single month, via automatic transfer from a joint bank account under the names Monica Harris and Darius Taylor. Taylor? That name didn't match any child records. She called the bank. Yes, the rent is paid automatically every first of the month, the representative said. Set up 5 years ago, from a shared checking account. Ms. Harris is the primary account holder. Martinez felt a chill run through her. Someone had orchestrated this. Someone had designed this abandonment like it was a business transaction. She pulled up social media. Monica Harris's profiles were still active. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and what she saw made her sick. Detective Sarah Martinez didn't sleep that night. Back in her office, surrounded by stale coffee and the soft hum of fluorescent lights, she stared at the wall covered in printed screenshots, bank statements, and names. Jalen's photo, eyes hollow, arms wrapped protectively around his siblings, was pinned dead center. She opened Monica Harris's social media profiles and started scrolling. The curated perfection made her stomach churn. But Martinez wasn't just looking for photos. She was reading timelines, matching captions with transaction dates, matching spa days with missed food deliveries. She pulled up grocery delivery records. Monica had used a no-name app called Quickmart Express. Martinez requested data and got lucky. The app had records of every order placed to apartment 4B. The earliest was March 2019. But something stuck out. In mid-2021, there were multiple missed deliveries. The app noted bags left at door, no pickup, and eventually a support ticket log that the customer had requested no knock, no contact deliveries only. Martinez's jaw tightened. She tracked down the app's customer service center and subpoenaed the audio file from that call. It was Monica's voice. I just want the groceries dropped off. No knocking, no talking, no issues. They'll be picked up. She knew. She knew the children were still inside. Next, Martinez dug through old CPS reports. Surprisingly, Monica had flown under the radar. One tip from a school nurse in 2017 had been marked inconclusive. Monica had pulled the twins out of school, claiming homeschooling for safety. There was no follow-up. Then came the school records. Jalen Harris. Last enrolled 2017. Jada Harris. Same. Cameron. Never enrolled. Martinez's hands balled into fists. These kids had been erased on paper before Monica ever left them. Then she thought of the bank. She called again. Can you verify the address tied to the co-holder, Darius Taylor? The rep hesitated, but with Martinez's credentials, the data came through. A gated property in Sugarland. 30 minutes from the hellhole the kids had been locked in. She mapped the two addresses side by side. One had a pool, a trimmed lawn, and a BMW in the driveway. The other had tally marks carved in a drywall and 3 children who couldn't remember how to speak. She leaned back, her whole body buzzing, not with caffeine, but with righteous fury. This wasn't just abandonment, she whispered to herself. This was architecture. A woman designed a prison for her own kids from paradise. And then, she got her car and drove. There were photos of Monica sipping cocktails in rooftop bars. Monica at a beach in Tulum. Monica poolside with a man who appeared to be in his 40s, neatly dressed, handsome, smiling. The caption read, "Grateful for a fresh start. No baggage. No drama. Just love." There was no mention of Jalen. No birthday post for Jada. No hint that Cameron even existed. For 5 years, Monica Harris had erased her own children. Martinez called the bank again. "I need the address associated with the co-holder, Darius Taylor." It was a beautiful, gated home in Sugarland, just 30 minutes outside the city. She ran Taylor's records. No criminal history, clean financials, licensed business owner. He ran a landscaping company with 6 employees and nearly 50 clients. He'd filed taxes every year, reported income, paid his workers. On paper, he looked like a dream citizen. So how did he fit into this? February 25th, 2024. 5 days after the discovery, Martinez stood outside the Sugarland property with 2 uniformed officers. The house was pristine, trimmed lawn, a white BMW in the driveway, a windshield that danced lightly in the breeze. Monica answered the door in silk pajamas, her nails manicured, face freshly done, with an expression that faltered the moment she saw the badge. "Monica Harris?" "Yes, can I help you?" Martinez pulled out her ID. "Detective Sarah Martinez, Houston PD. We need to speak with you about your children." Monica went pale. "My what?" "Jalen, Jada, Cameron." There was a long silence, a flicker of panic behind her lashes, and then, "I can explain. You'll have a chance to. But first, you're under arrest for child abandonment, child endangerment, and criminal neglect." The cuffs clicked around her wrists, and Monica, after 5 years of silence, finally began to scream. "I paid the rent," she yelled as they put her in the squad car. "I sent food. I didn't abandon them. I kept them alive." But everyone who heard those words, the neighbors, the police, the medics, knew the truth. Monica Harris had abandoned her children in the worst way imaginable. She hadn't left them to die. She'd left them to fade. At the station, Martinez sat across from Monica in a small gray room. Gone was the confident, curated woman from social media. She looked brittle now, defeated. "Why?" Martinez asked softly. "Why would you leave them?" Monica stared at the table. "I didn't want to be a mother," she said. Her voice was flat, honest. "I never asked for it. I never chose it. Every time I had a baby, it was because I was trying to keep a man. And when they left, I was stuck. With them. With kids I didn't love." Martinez didn't flinch. "You had 5 years to come back." Monica looked away. "I was finally happy. Darius didn't want kids. I told him I didn't have any. I created a whole new life. It was peaceful. No crying. No diapers. No asking. Just me. For once. And the food? The rent? Why keep paying? Because I didn't want to be charged with murder. I figured if I kept them technically alive, no one could say I abandoned them." Martinez slid a photo across the table. Jalen, in the hallway, hair matted, eyes hollow. He scratched a line into the wall for every day you were gone. He waited for you. Every day. Monica's eyes filled with tears. But Martinez had seen enough to know she wasn't crying for her children. She was crying for herself. The news hit like a bomb. Houston mother abandons her 3 kids for 5 years while living a luxury life with boyfriend. They were starving in silence. She was posting selfies in Cancun. How can no one notice? The forgotten children of apartment 4B. It wasn't just a headline. It was a nationwide gut punch. People were furious. Strangers wept in front of TV screens. Social workers, parents, survivors of abuse. Everyone felt it in their bones. 3 kids. 5 years. Total abandonment. No one noticed. No one asked questions. Except one person did. And now the entire country was watching. Inside the courtroom, the spotlight turned harsh and cold. No filters. No distractions. Just truth and consequences. Monica Harris sat shackled at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, stripped of the glamour, the lies, the curated image. Her extensions were gone, nails chipped, makeup smudged. Her eyes were hollow, like a person already halfway erased. Across the aisle sat Darius Taylor, the man she had built her new life with. The man who thought she had no children. The man who had absolutely no idea he had been financing the prison her children were living in for half a decade. He looked like someone had knocked the air out of him and never let it back in. The prosecutor didn't waste time. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said to the jury, "Monica Harris didn't just walk away from her children. She calculated their erasure. She deleted them from her life while maintaining just enough survival, bare minimum food, rent, to keep their deaths off her conscience and off the state's radar." The courtroom watched in silence as photos were shown. Monica sipping cocktails poolside in Cancun, a smiling selfie at a rooftop bar in Austin, a receipt for a $1,200 spa package. Instagram captions like #no drama, #living my best life. And then came the contrast. Jalen, 15 years old, weighing 68 pounds. Jada's wrists wrapped in gauze from self-inflicted scratches. Cameron, 11, clinging to a soiled stuffed animal, unable to form full sentences. The jurors flinched. She didn't disappear. The prosecutor continued. She rebuilt. She didn't forget. She chose not to look back. A recording was played, an old phone call between Monica and a friend. "Girl, I'm living my best life. No stress, no kids, no mess." "Wait, what about your kids?" Laughing, "What kids? I don't have any damn kids." The room went ice cold. The defense tried to soften the blow. "Ms. Harris suffers from long-term, untreated depression," her attorney argued. "She was abandoned by every man she's ever trusted. She lacked a support system, lived in survival mode her entire adult life, and made horrific decisions because she saw no other way out." But no one was buying it, because depression doesn't explain 5 years of silence. 5 years of groceries instead of hugs. 5 years of rent payments instead of phone calls. 5 years of doing nothing while your children wither into ghosts. And then came Darius. He took the stand, voice shaking. "She told me she had no kids," he said. "She told me that account was for a storage unit with old furniture from her grandmother." He swallowed hard, unable to look at Monica. "I'm not a parent. I've never been a parent. But if I had known there were kids living like that, I'd have done something. I would have called the police. I would have kicked in the damn door myself." He wasn't on trial, but you could see the guilt written all over his face. When it was Monica's turn to speak, she stood slowly, shoulders hunched. For a moment, the room braced. Maybe she'd break down. Maybe she'd show remorse. She didn't. "I never wanted to be a mother," she said plainly. "I was a kid having kids. Every time I got pregnant, I thought it would make the guy stay. It never worked. And I got stuck. With them." The words hit like slaps. "I didn't hurt them. I kept them alive. I sent food. I paid the rent. I gave them a place to be safe." A juror shook her head. The judge stared hard. Finally, the prosecutor stood and laid one last photo on the table. A close-up of Jalen's tally marks on the wall. One for each day his mother was gone. 1,825 lines. "Do you know what those are?" she asked. Monica didn't answer. He was counting the days until you came back. Until you cared. The judge turned grim. "This is one of the most willful, egregious acts of parental neglect I've seen in my entire career," she said. "It wasn't just abandonment. It was erasure. And the children paid for it with their minds, their bodies, and their trust in the world." Then came the sentence. 45 years in prison. No possibility of parole for the first 25. Monica didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just nodded, almost as if she knew it was coming. Because somewhere deep down, she had already written herself out of their story a long time ago. Jalen didn't smile when the judge sentenced his mother to 45 years. He didn't flinch. He didn't cry. He just looked down at his shoes, the new ones, and tapped his thumb against the inside of his palm. 1, 2, 3, a nervous tick he couldn't break. Jada sat beside him in silence, fingers laced tightly in her lap. Cameron clung to the sleeve of their foster father's jacket, his stuffed animal newly washed but still missing one eye. The courtroom buzzed around them. Reporters, cameras, murmurs of justice served, but the three of them sat frozen, like statues trying to remember how to breathe. They weren't free yet. Not really. The Johnsons were good people. Marcus and Kesha Johnson had fostered over a dozen children in the past 8 years. They were patient, trauma-informed, and full of a kind of warmth that didn't demand anything in return. But nothing had prepared them for Jalen, Jada, and Cameron. The first week in their home, the kids wouldn't leave their shared bedroom. Kesha knocked softly every morning. "Pancakes are ready, y'all." No answer. She slid plates of food into the room and stepped back. Sometimes the food was eaten. Sometimes it wasn't. No one ever spoke. Jalen kept his back to the wall at night, eyes locked on the door. Jada slept with a towel over her head. Cameron refused to sleep unless the hallway light was on and the door stayed cracked 2 inches open. Not more. Not less. It took 2 weeks before Jalen said his first word to Marcus. "Thank you." It was barely above a whisper, but it was a start. Therapy came next. 3 times a week, they sat in the office of Dr. Evelyn Monroe, a trauma specialist who had worked with refugees, abuse survivors, and kids who'd grown up in the foster system. Jalen sat stiff, arms crossed. He hated being asked how he felt. He didn't know. Or maybe he knew too well and didn't want to go back there. Jada never made eye contact, but she listened. Always. "Cameron?" He cried. A lot. But his tears weren't loud. They were quiet, trembling things that slid down his cheeks without expression. He cried while coloring, while brushing his teeth, while watching cartoons. As if his body was releasing 5 years of grief drop by drop. "Tell me about the tallies," Dr. Monroe said to Jalen one day. He shrugged. They were just days. "Were you counting for something?" He didn't answer at first. Then, softly, "For her to come back. Do you wish he had?" A long silence. "No." In school, things were worse. Jalen tested at a 6th grade reading level. Jada, even lower. Cameron couldn't follow instructions without panicking. Loud noises made him flinch. The school counselor said it would take years, maybe longer, to rebuild what had been lost. Kids stared. Some asked questions. One girl asked Jada why her clothes were all secondhand. Jada didn't say a word, just stared back hard until the girl looked away. Jalen got in a fight his first month. A boy made fun of his shoes. Jalen shoved him so hard into a locker, he split his lip open. When they called Marcus to pick him up, Jalen was shaking, eyes wide, breathing like he couldn't get air. "I thought you were going to send me back," he said in the car. Marcus pulled over, looked him in the eye. "We don't send people back here, Jay. We hold on. That's the whole point." Jalen didn't say anything. But that night, he ate dinner at the table for the first time. As the months passed, small victories bloomed like cracks of sunlight through old, boarded-up windows. Jada smiled once, just once, when Kesha let her pick out a pair of earrings at the mall. Cameron built a Lego castle and placed it beside his bed, whispering to it like it could protect him. Jalen joined the library club at school. He didn't tell anyone, not even his foster parents. But Dr. Monroe found out and said nothing. She just nodded. There were still bad days. Jada still woke up screaming sometimes. Cameron once hid in the closet for 2 hours after a car alarm went off in the driveway. Jalen stopped speaking for a full week after seeing a woman at the grocery store who looked like Monica. But they kept going, because now, finally, someone was walking with them. One Sunday morning, as Kesha folded laundry and Marcus sipped coffee, Jalen came into the kitchen. He held something in his hand. It was a small sheet of notebook paper. On it were 5 vertical lines, then 4 diagonals crossed through, the same tally marks he used to scratch into the wall. "This was the last page," he said. "The last one I wrote. The day she got arrested." Kesha stared at it. Her throat tightened. "I was going to start again," he said. "One for every day that felt normal." Marcus leaned in. "And how many you got now?" Jalen looked down. 14. Then he added, 15 today, I guess. He folded the paper and put it in his pocket. No one said a word. They didn't need to, because sometimes healing doesn't arrive all at once. Sometimes it comes one day at a time. Jalen turned 16 on a quiet Wednesday. There was no party, no balloons, no big surprise. Just a homemade chocolate cake from Kesha, a hand-me-down bike that Marcus had spent weeks fixing up, and 3 words that meant more than any wrapped gift. "We're proud of you." Jalen didn't know how to respond to that. No one had ever said it before. He didn't cry. He didn't smile much either. But later that night, when everyone was asleep, he wheeled the bike into the backyard, sat on the porch, and whispered the words again to himself, just to see how they felt in his mouth. "We're proud of you." Jada wasn't the same girl from the apartment anymore, but she wasn't free yet either. While Jalen found solace in reading and scribbling in journals, Jada turned to silence. She still hadn't spoken a full paragraph to anyone but Dr. Monroe. But she'd started something else, a journal of her own. Each entry began the same way. "Today, I am real." Then she would list tiny observations. "I brushed my hair without crying. Kesha let me pick my own shirt, and I didn't freeze up. No one yelled today. I think I laughed. It felt weird." Sometimes, she wrote memories she couldn't shake. The smell of spoiled juice, the weight of Cameron's head on her lap when he had a fever, the shadow of the door that never opened. But more often, she wrote about things she'd never had. Fresh socks, someone asking how her day was, sunlight that didn't burn. One day, she asked Kesha in a quiet voice, "Do you think I could be a doctor?" Kesha blinked, then smiled so gently it almost made Jada cry. "I think you'd be a damn good one." That was the first time Jada said she wanted something. Cameron, the youngest, still lived halfway in the shadows. He clung to his routines like life preservers. Toothbrush, same cartoon, same seat at the table. Every night, he checked to make sure the hallway light was on and the door was cracked, exactly 2 inches. But he was changing too, in his own way. He'd started whispering to his stuffed animal, now patched, cleaned, and renamed Captain Brave. He gave it powers. "Captain Brave can make bad dreams go away," he explained softly to Marcus one night. "But only if you believe in him real hard." One afternoon, Kesha found Cameron in the laundry room, huddled in a pile of warm towels. He looked up and asked, "Can I stay here forever?" She didn't cry in front of him, but she nodded, sat down in the towels, and held him until he fell asleep. They were still fragile, still flinching at certain sounds, still unsure if this happiness was permanent. But they were no longer alone in the dark. One afternoon, all 3 sat on the living room floor with popcorn between them, watching a movie about space and astronauts. Jayla made a joke that wasn't even funny, but Jada giggled. Cameron laughed too, mouth full, eyes bright. It wasn't a big moment, but for the Johnsons, standing in the kitchen, watching from afar, it was everything. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. Jada still flinched when someone hugged her from behind. She still kept a backpack full of clothes under her bed, just in case. Cameron had just started calling Marcus Dad, but only when no one else was in the room. Loud sounds still scared him. Once, he heard a microwave beep and hid under the table. But they were moving forward, little by little. Dr. Monroe called it reclaiming normal. She said it was like learning to walk after being told your whole life you didn't have legs. Jalen was the first to ask about their mother. Not out loud, just in a question he scribbled in his therapy journal. "If she ever gets out, what happens to us?" The question hung like a shadow for weeks. Eventually, Dr. Monroe brought it up in a session. "What do you think should happen?" Jalen stared at the floor. "I think she should stay forgotten, like she did to us." Then he looked up, eyes steady. "But I don't want to be angry forever. I just don't want to be hers anymore." 6 months after the trial, a journalist came knocking. She wanted to do a documentary. Said the world needed to hear their story from the inside. Kesha said absolutely not. Marcus said maybe. Jalen said yes, but only if he could write his own part. So he did, with a pen in one hand and a photo in the other. A photo of the tally marks he'd scratched into the wall of that dark apartment. Jalen began to write. He wrote about the hunger, the silence, the stink, the cold. He wrote about Cameron's thumb, Jada's eyes, the way sunlight hurt after too long in the dark. He wrote about counting every day for 5 years and how no one came. He wrote about the knock that finally broke the silence. About Michelle Rodriguez, the woman next door who heard something when everyone else heard nothing. He ended it like this. "People keep asking how this happened. How did nobody notice? How did we survive? The real question is, how many more are still waiting to be found? That quote ended up on billboards, in news articles, in social work textbooks. Jalen never liked being called a survivor. He said it made it sound like the hard part was over. It wasn't, but he was still here. So were Jada and Cameron. And that was enough for now. 1 year later, the Johnsons legally adopted all 3 siblings. The ceremony was small. A courtroom, a few friends, some cake afterward in the church basement. When the judge asked if Jalen wanted to change his name, he said no. I want to keep Harris, he said. Not because of her, but because I earned it. Then he paused. But I'd like to add something. He looked at Marcus and Kesha. Can I be a Johnson too? As they left the courthouse that afternoon, Cameron ran ahead with his new scooter. Jada laughed, really laughed for the first time in a long while. And Jalen? He took a deep breath, the kind that fills your chest and clears your head. No more tally marks. Just days. Normal days. And this time, someone was counting with him.